I firmly believe there's no such thing as a bad child. That often, the child is either bored or confused or, just lacking communication. Like I firmly believe that. There's obviously some things that, external things like that with mental health and whatnot. But yet when I talk to some camps and they talk about children and they talk about children that might fall into an inclusion program and they're having challenging behavior, they talk about them in a way that is frustration. And I think if we could give them some tips and tricks and some things that they can either use with themselves or use with the child on their challenging behavior, that would be great.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree. No child is a bad child. No kiddo should be referred to as a behavior kid or
Mhm.
even an inclusion kid, right? So first of all, I want to start with the language that we use around kiddos, right? Campers who utilize inclusion supports. We want to make sure we're not identifying because that's a big form of otherism, like, oh, they're an inclusion kid.
Yeah.
Well, all campers should be inclusion kiddos, right? Some just may need different supports, right? So we want to try to make sure we're not using that language. And we also don't, we want to be mindful not to identify somebody by their disability, their diagnosis, their deficit, the challenging behaviors, right? And like not calling them the blank kid, the ADHD kid, the challenging kid, or even, the Down syndrome girl, right? That's language that is really harmful. And what we want to do is always start with language, and it's called social role valorization. If you can learn about what makes somebody shine and what makes them great at, a certain activity, or what do they love, or their habits, or their hobbies, then we can focus on that, and they can stop being identified as the bad kid, the challenging kid, the inclusion kid, the whatever, right? And start getting to know somebody as really good artist or a super great swimmer, right? Or so kind and thoughtful, an animal lover. So when we start with identifying somebody by a strength or positive attribute, first of all, they're going to be thrilled to be identified that way and not as the trouble kid, right? You are increasing the chances of them being seen as socially valued by their peers. So the ability to make a friend. So if we can see our role is helping that kiddo, it's not about controlling their behaviors, but creating a space where that kiddo might be able to make a friend. And that starts by focusing on their strengths and what makes them shine, right? And then you're going to you're going to decrease the chance for any challenging behaviors, right? And then my number one tip about thinking about challenging behaviors in a few words is it's behaviors or communication. So just don't forget that. And instead of stop doing that behavior, our mind should go to immediately to what's going on? Why is that happening? And working with the kiddo, the camper, to maybe solve that, figure out what's the antecedent. Are they hungry? Are they overwhelmed? Are they tired? Are they bored? It could be a range of things. You changed the schedule and you didn't let me know, right? Or you just rushed me. I wasn't done with my artwork. And then it caused, a challenging behavior because we didn't give them the proper time to kind of get ready for the next activity. So always look at challenging behaviors as something, a form of communication. And if we can figure out what's going on, then we can determine how to support them. So whatever the category, whether it is, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm this, I'm bored, somebody just made fun of me, whatever that is, I'm scared, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, then we can help to solve, right? And help them to be more successful. That's going to decrease challenging behavior. So a lot of it is our mindset on how we approach kiddos. Definitely don't want to start with they're the bad kid, the challenging kid, the behavior kid.
Yeah, I think it's funny you mentioned mindset too, right? Because I think one of the biggest issues we all have is fatigue will eventually set in, right? So
Mm.
like week one, how we handle an issue versus week six sometimes is too
Mhm.
is super far apart, and the juxtaposition's wild. And it could be the same kid, it could be a different kid.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips on either working your way through that if you've been working with the same kid for a while,
Yeah.
or if you're just seeing this issue repeatedly happen? throughout the summer? It might be a different kid. It's two different questions, but wherever you
No,
want to
no,
take it.
no, it's a very good question. And fatigue will set in, and some of the strategies for inclusion. If something isn't working, you try something else. But when you start getting to week 5 and you're like, I've tried everything and it's not
Yes, yeah,
working,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I get that. I can understand that. But I think if we can just always go back to connection, right? The more we want to see, are most of our interactions focused on, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but like waiting for them to make a mistake so you can be like, see, stop that, don't do
Hmm.
that, don't do that, and really check ourselves as the adults in the room or the counselors. Are we just kind of scanning the room, and because we're tired, we have to get through this day, right? And another week, we're on week 6 and we're all exhausted, and always focusing on pointing out the bad. Or can we check ourselves and say, how often am I pointing out the good? Like, and it could be from that camper or another one, because we want to teach. We always have to see ourselves. Every action you take as a counselor is teaching these campers what's expected, and what we're looking for positive and aligned behavior for our expectations for our camp. So start there, I think, really, looking at the way we're framing it ourselves, right? And making sure we're building up connection with these kiddos so that we're not always focusing on when they make a mistake, but pull out something great. Oh, I knew you were such a great artist. Look at that picture you made. That's amazing, right? So really trying to build that connection, and then talk a little bit more. Oh, I'm into music too. Who's your favorite band? Oh, cool. Yeah, me too. I like that, Oh, I heard Joey also loves that genre of music, right? So you can start to, you know, focus on connection, because often we make the mistake of saying behaviors are attention seeking. Maybe it's just connection seeking. So if we just pull out that word attention, plug in connection, that might be the difference. And that could give us a little bit more energy to get through that week 6, right? Is because when you have those connections to build on, and when something good goes, something goes well, make sure we say that out loud, because often we forget. You know what? Remember week 1, how challenging it was? Look at how far we've helped this kiddo to be successful in camp. Celebrate all the successes that you've had too, and cut yourself some slack when you have a bad day, because that happens as well, right? So
100%.
just cut yourself some slack, and come reframe the next day with, I'm going to be focused on connection seeking, not attention seeking. That's attention seeking behavior. But how can I build a better connection with this kiddo? Get to know
So
them
fair.
better, not just their disability diagnosis or behavior.
Yeah. So, share with you that one of the anecdotes I've been sharing this season as I train camp staff is I've been telling folks uh, I recently heard a therapist say that the voices we use later on in life when we're stressed are often the voices we hear when we're younger. So if you're ever stressed and you're about to take a test, whether it's high school or college or just like
Yeah,
you're going to the DMV and like you're stressed because it's rising and you start telling yourself you're dumb. Well, that's
yeah,
because when you were younger, somebody was telling you that, right? And
yeah,
so when we think about a lot of these kids, they are picking up on when you're treating them differently,
yeah,
and
yeah,
regardless of ability. And so you coming in with aggression, you coming in frustrated, you coming
mm,
in with bias, they will pick up on that. And so that's you start thinking about it that way, it's like that's heavy, right? Like
yeah,
that's a huge
yeah,
responsibility.
yeah.
At the
No,
same
for
point in
sure.
time,
Yeah.
you know, you get points for just hanging out with the kid.
Yeah, right, right. I had a
Like you
counsel
just being a good
yesterday.
hang and and
Yeah,
finding
yeah.
seeing the good in them,
No,
right? Like it's everything.
it
Yeah.
is. I had a counselor yesterday. I thought this was like, so it was very striking to me. We break out into groups, and they were practicing changing a negative statement to positive. So instead of knock it off, stop making a mess, be very clear. What do you need to happen? Oh, we'll need to clean up right now together. Let's do that. Right. So when we were going through, they have like a series of negative statements and they change it positive. I was going around to the groups, and he had said, what do you do if all anybody has ever known is, he's like, I've only known the negative. That's how I grew up. I was always yelled at, told what I was doing wrong. And
Yes.
and then he probably, I'm gonna make a guess, ended up being like, maybe a little challenging in school. So he probably heard the same thing from teachers and maybe from coaches and instructors. And he made a very good point. This is all I've ever heard. Like this sounds so weird to say the positive because I've never heard that. And he was a new counselor. So you have to maybe understand that some of our counselors are going to come to the table having experienced only that same negative kind of language and approach, or punish, you're going to get punished if you do something wrong, rather than
Exactly.
helping to teach a kiddo how to do something right. And I
Yeah.
thought
And
that
then
was striking.
well, and the truth too is like that staff member is then on one side, it's either side of the pendulum, right? They're either
Mhm.
super strict because that's what worked for me,
Yeah.
or they're the opposite. They're
Yeah.
laissez-faire and
Yeah.
they don't talk up until something's awful and frankly past the point of fixing, you
Yeah.
know? So it's like it rarely creates the well-balanced person. It usually
Yeah.
creates somebody that's in here and I feel for those folks because they have a lot of deprogramming to do. And that's actually the best part about working with kids, right? Is like you
Yeah.
it causes introspection to be like, oh, if someone just talked to me this way, I probably would have been much better, you know? So
Right, right.
healing in
And
some
how
aspect.
and how I interact or respond is what they're learning. So if I get upset and heated, then they're saying, "Oh, if you want your way, all you have to do is get upset and heated and bark out a command," because it's exactly what you're teaching is how you're interacting. So it was very eye-opening to hear that, and I was so appreciated this person's honesty and upfrontness. Like, this is all I heard growing up. These positive things sound so weird because I've never heard it.